You're listening to the Mindset Advantage podcast with Elliot Rowe and Dr. Tricia Gardner.
So welcome to the show, and today we've got Paul Collins on, also known as Cog Dissonance, on 2+2 and on PokerStars. And now Paul's a specialist. He used to play heads up, sit and goes, and he's actually moved over to spins, and he's a long-term coach in those games, and he's going to be talking about the importance of the mental game in those games, and really just how things have been evolving in poker, and how he, as sort of a mid-stakes grinder, has been making the most of those changes and just trying to make sure he continues to make a living and a profit and the things he's had to do. So Tricia, what have you got for us today in psychology news you can use?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and continue on the path that I started on our last episode. And I want to bring another tip out of the Little Book of Talent, 52 Tips for Improving Your Skills by Daniel Coyle, who also wrote the Talent Code. And a tip that he has in here that I think is really relevant for poker players who are trying to improve their games is to buy and keep a notebook. Now, it doesn't have to be a physical notebook. It could be, on your computer, or on your phone, or whatever. But he found in his research that a very high percentage of top performers keep some form of daily performance journal. And he found this was true whether it was, people like Serena Williams or Kurt Schilling or even Eminem. They all have a way to measure and track their performance. And you really got to keep track of your results and also ideas or maybe even goals. And that's one of the ways that you can actually increase performance and kind of shorten that learning curve, even if you keep track and then you review it, because you can make changes a little more easily and see where you need to make those changes.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And I would even say, I think actually having a hard copy book or notepad can sometimes be better, because I've definitely noticed when I've had clients doing it, sometimes folders on your computer can be sort of ignored. But if you do have something next to your computer that's pretty large that you've been writing in, it's much more likely that you're going to bother with that and look at it each day.
Yeah, I think you just have to make a habit out of it. And then once you get in the habit of it, you will see how valuable it is. And then you're going to keep on with it. But it's the kind of thing that if you only do it, once a week, you're not really going to get benefit. It's every single day.
Definitely. So keep the consistency up, guys, and write your journals.
That's right.
So just before we give Paul a call, I'm just going to mention I'm releasing a new Spin and Go pre-game MP3, which will be available on my website, and there'll be a link on this page as well. So if anyone's playing the spins and they want a specific pre-game MP3, make sure to check that link out. So let's give Paul a call. So Paul, thanks for coming on to the show. If you could introduce yourself to our listeners.
All right. I play on PokerStars under the screen name CogDis, and I've been playing poker and coaching poker forever. I'm like one of the oldest guys around in the game, which is not much of a claim to fame. But I have been in the sort of heads up, sit and goes at the mid stakes for 6 or 7 years. And then I switched over to spins, which is a new format on Stars, which has proved incredibly popular. And I've also done a lot of coaching over the years. And I guess my claim to fame is not that I'm one of the best players around. I'm like an okay player, but I've survived as a professional poker player for like 9 years and supported my family, which is something I'm proud of.
That is pretty impressive. In poker years, 9 years is like many decades, right?
It feels that way. They're like dog years.
So can you just tell our listeners a little bit about the spins games, how they work and, where the edges can be had?
Well, you get 3 players in each game, and before the game starts, they spin a multiplier to see how much you're going to play for. So it can be the minimum is 2x. So if you're playing in the hundreds, like you've got the $200 prize, and the maximum is like $1 million. And it's a pretty incredible format because it attracts recreational players because of the excitement of how much you're going to win. A lot of the edge, I think, is not just that you'll be playing against a fairly high percentage of recreational players. It's that when they get a 2x, they just often don't care about it and are willing to throw their money around. So a 2x, which would be a primarily losing game because you've got less than the 3 buy-ins, you can get quite a lot of edge because recreational players is like a 2x, move on to the next one. They don't really care.
Very interesting. And how long do the games take typically? And is it a situation where multi-tabling, massive multi-tabling, you're able to do that?
You can't really mass multi-table. I know some guys do, and they just beat Rake, but ideally, I think most players are playing sort of 4 tables. Average game duration is about 7.5 minutes. And because your head's up so often, you can't be playing like ABC robot style poker. You've really got to be focused, and you've really got to be playing your A game to get a decent edge. But the ROIs that are achievable in the format are really high compared to other ROIs. Like when I was playing the $30 level, I had an expected ROI of about 10% over thousands and thousands of games. That's pre-rake back. Whereas if you look at 6 max hypers or something like that, I mean, guys would be happy to be breaking even with rake.
Yeah, 1%
I mean, like,
is amazing.
Yeah, 1% would be fantastic. So it's like these things have massive edge compared to other games.
And thinking about that, I know that there was a huge uproar last year when they were released, and there were things written on 2+2 saying these games are unbeatable and Stars are turning this into purely a casino. And what are your thoughts about how that's played out over the years as the game's developed?
Well, whenever a new game comes in, the regs are always, oh, the sky is falling. And I'll be completely honest with you. I worked out they were profitable right at the start and then lied my ass off. I basically said, don't come to the format. They're terrible. Don't think you can beat them. And it was quite amusing because right at the start, there'd be regs playing them, and you would know that they were playing them pretty much full time. And you'd see each other in the games, and then you'd be feeling each other out like, oh, what do you think of spins? And he'd say, oh, not much. I'm just like trying them out for fun. And you know he's grinding them full time, but he doesn't want you to know that spins are profitable. So he's like, we were both sitting there lying to each other. Oh, yeah, no, we're just like, I just play a few now and again. It was pretty amusing.
And has it changed much now that they've introduced, obviously the hundreds is relatively recent. Has that changed the dynamic of the games much? Have a lot more players moved from heads up to sit and goes? Or what has that done to the games?
They've become much tougher. I'm playing hundreds at the moment, and I'm honestly thinking twice about whether they're even beatable at this stage. The $100 level is pretty brutal. If you get too many regs in a game, with 5% rake, you just can't beat the games. We used to have software called SpinWiz, which was a game selection tool, which Stars decided we could do without. So they banned it, and now game selection's therefore impossible. And basically, you're having a lot of 3-reg games where everybody's losing money. It's the higher levels have really toughened up remarkably over the last sort of 2 months or so.
There's so much going on at PokerStars, and I know, we primarily talk about the mental game, but do you just want to get into a little bit about what you think of the changes that PokerStars is rolling out and what those are going to do to the player pool and the games and all that?
Yeah, I mean, when companies acquire new companies, they do it because they think they can make a lot of cash. I mean, it's like sometimes it's, well, this will be a long-term investment. This is going to be like a slow burner that will bring us in money. And other times it's a money grab. And I think they saw a lot of value that was being left on the table with PokerStars. I mean, by taking away Supernova Elite and the extra Supernova money, they can probably just like rake in an extra 100 million a year straight off the bat. It's basically a way of increasing rake, but they decided that going for the money grab was their best policy. They've got shareholders to please. It's going to make the games tougher at all levels because they won't be beatable without the extra rakeback that people were expecting. People will have to move down, which will make the games tougher at lower levels. It's going to be much tougher for regs. It'll be tougher for recreational players, but PokerStars will get away with like making a lot more money. Basically, they said, we don't care about regs. We're just going to take the money, and there's nothing you can do about it because we have a monopoly. And then regs whined and carried on, and eventually they'll realize, yes, you're correct. There's been talk on the forums of, let's do a 1-week strike or a 1-month strike. That's just so ridiculous to post something like that on a public forum. Okay, PokerStars, if you wait 1 month, our complaints, sort of our strike action will end, and then it'll be business as usual. I mean, like, what would you do in that situation if you're PokerStars? You're like, okay, go have your fun. We'll see you in a month. Our profits will dip for a little bit, and then basically the fuss will be over. It's a fairly pointless form of protest.
And I mean, in terms of for the games, do you think there are other options out there in terms of the other sites, or are they too questionable for you to be comfortable sort of putting your living on those other sites?
I would be seriously thinking, if you're a professional player, I'd seriously be thinking about spreading your action around, like wherever the softest games are. are where you need to be. As far as some of the American sites, I know people, and I've coached people that play on the Winning Poker Network, and they've been able to cash out fine. I mean, there are certainly some dodgy sites out there, but there are some major sites which have been okay over the years. Even if the cash outs have been slow, like people have got their money in sort of reasonable time. So, I think spreading action would be a really good idea.
Yeah.
So you've been a coach for a very long time, as we established at the top of the show. What kind of advice would you give to somebody who's just coming into the games right now as to, how they should prepare themselves, what games should they focus on, that sort of thing?
The level of preparation and study you need in today's games is insane compared to what it used to be. And maybe I can plug like Elliot's sort of MP3s and perhaps your book a little bit, like any mental edge that you can give yourself. I mean, it's just so essential. Like back in the day, the edges are so huge. You could be a retarded spew monkey and still make a fortune. These days, any chip you give away is really going to hurt you. So like you've got to get every chip you can out of the games. You've got to have like the strongest possible mental game. It's like, I think about it like a football team. I mean, if you were a football team, you wouldn't just run onto the pitch and play. I mean, you would prepare yourself in the best possible way. There'd be like motivational speeches before the game, stretching, warm-ups, and then you would go out and perform. And you have to just perform at your absolute best possible level these days.
And how do you feel about seeing it become more like that? I know that the heads-up sit-and-go lobbies obviously have become incredibly competitive, almost like a professional sport now. Do you sort of miss the old days when it was more relaxed, or is it quite nice to see that, wow, this is actually becoming very professional and very serious?
All I care about is putting food on the table. Like that's all I've ever cared about in the easiest possible fashion. So I would prefer that there were drooling fish donating me thousands of dollars every day. That would be wonderful. I don't think anyone would say, no, I don't want that.
Yeah.
I just want, like, I think all poker players are just there. I mean, competing is fun and like proving you're the best. There's a certain amount of ego and that sort of thing. But I gave up on that years ago. I just want to make money.
And there's nothing wrong with making a few bucks, is there?
It keeps everything rolling, puts food on the table, keeps the kids happy. I mean, that's the bottom line at the end of the day.
Exactly. One thing that I'm really interested in is, hacks. And I don't know if you know that term, being from down under, but a hack is kind of like a shortcut, but an ethical one is what I'm talking about. And so the idea is kind of, 20% of your activities give you 80% of your results. Have you seen any ways you could kind of apply that sort of thinking to the games that you play?
Well, that's a good question and a tough one for me. Like, I can't think of an immediate obvious answer, but I mean, there are lots of situations that come up over and over again, which honestly, like lazy professional players don't even know the correct answers to. Like, what should I do in this spot, pre-flop or post-flop? And I guess if you have all those situations absolutely dialed in, then that's a tiny bit of effort, which gives you a huge return. I mean, that might not be exactly the answer you're looking for, but I think that's kind of understanding, the right answer in those spots that come up over and over again and which cost you money if you get wrong is like a really important thing to have under control.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I'm getting at. Like, what are those sorts of things that if you do have them really dialed in, you're going to get the biggest return on, if you will? And so I really like your answer there.
Yeah, and let me add to that. Like, the funny thing is because spins are a new format, like a lot of the three-handed play is still unknown. And what I see is like really good heads-up players that are just terrible three-handed and don't seem to put the work in. So at the risk of making my own games harder, like if guys are not working on their three-handed games in spins, then they're burning money just like every minute they're sitting at the table.
And do you think that's an ego thing? People coming across from the heads up sit and goes thinking it is, such a difficult game type. Surely I'll crush the spins without any work.
It could be that. It also could be that they don't know how to do the work. Like they know how to do the work heads up and how to improve, and three-handed is a bit foreign to them and they're just not sure sort of how to do that effectively, or they're being lazy and relying on other people. But I've had a look at a lot of people's three-handed results, and like they could just be making so much more money if they knew how to do the work, or if they came for coaching.
Yeah, coaching a call. Give them a call.
Well, coaching is actually one of those kind of, shortcuts or hacks like I was speaking about earlier. It's one way people can really cut through the noise is to get a coach who can, point things out really quickly and easily.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's a shortcut. And also you've got somebody whose life, if he's a good coach, revolves around staying on top of the games. and staying at the sort of cutting edge. So it allows you to grind more and just get that information quickly. Like I had a guy who came to me yesterday and I gave him sort of so much information. He actually paid me more than my hourly rate. He was so happy about it. So, I mean, it was just like, oh, I got so much from this. Like, I know what your hourly is. Here's a bunch more money because it helped me so much.
Wow.
It's a shortcut.
Yeah. I mean, if you're saving someone's hours and they can spend those hours playing, it could be worth a lot more for them, couldn't it?
Well, yeah, otherwise it wouldn't be a good investment. But like coaching traditionally has proved to be a pretty fantastic investment for most players.
And in terms of your mental game, the things you've done, the changes you've seen over the years, so how did you see that evolution from heads up and then into the spins and just the way that you've dealt with the mental game around all of that?
Well, the formats that I've played, heads up and spins, are incredibly mentally taxing. It's not like nine men's where you sit there and like play mostly pre-flop and it's mostly just like robot style. Like it's a really personal game and I've had incredible mental game issues. I tried everything and I know it's like a bit obvious to be on your podcast and say that you were the man that helps me, but like you literally not only changed my poker game, but changed my life with the hypnotherapy that I did with you. I was struggling so incredibly hard. I would headbutt my phone and I would throw mice. I would scream and do all sorts of immature behavior. This is a grown man, like acting like a little child. And these days, like poker is so much more relaxed and happy for me. It's just a really positive environment compared to what it used to be. So, I mean, I owe so much to Elliot for how much he's helped me with my mental game.
A wonderful advert. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I know that's like come on the podcast and like push Elliot's product, but that's not really what I'm thinking. I genuinely believe that.
I appreciate it. It's amazing to hear that it helps so much. And obviously, in terms of the anger at the table, that's something that if anyone's out there and you are getting frustrated and smashing things, there are ways of working through all of that, be it with me or with one of the other mental game coaches. So, keep your eyes out and actually work on it because it puts so much stress on the game, doesn't it, Paul, if you are that sort of stressed out and taking it that seriously?
Yeah, I mean, work is a large part of your life. And if you just get stressed during your work, it's not that pleasant. I mean, if it's a positive and happy environment, like, if poker is like a positive thing for you, then it just makes the rest of your life so much easier. And that stress doesn't sort of fall over into other areas. And we're not all going to have heart attacks and die by the time we're 50 because we're so stressed. So I just think you're crazy to work and be unhappy with your work.
Absolutely. You know what else is interesting is, I don't know how long this went on where you were smashing things and whatever, but isn't it interesting how quickly and easily it can be resolved with a mental game coach? Or was that kind of your experience?
It was like a weight was like lifted off my shoulders. The first session, like it took a while for me to get into it, but after that, the progress was just incredible. So it really changed who I am as a person and helped me deal with a lot of my personal issues. I mean, I know Elliot works with both poker players and MMA fighters, and those sort of, like, especially MMA fighters, I'm assuming have a lot of background issues that cause them to
interesting stories, certainly.
Yeah, exactly. And I had my fair share of background issues as well. So, I mean, like, he's dealing with people that can really do with the help, and he just like helps people so much. The only danger I think with MMA fighters is if you take that anger away, then maybe they're going to need to change professions.
They become poker players. Yeah.
We definitely have to channel it, right? What do you think is the reason why so many people traditionally have been so resistant to, getting some sort of mental game training or coaching?
I think it's new, and it's just like psychiatry or psychology sort of 30 or 40 years ago that people saw it as like some sort of stigma attached. There was something wrong with you. Whereas the way I see it is you're just getting everything running as smoothly as it can so you can perform at your best, which is like, I see it as like necessary maintenance so that you can bring out your A game as compared to there's something wrong with you if you have a mental coach. I mean, it's just like, I want to make as much money as I can and I don't want to be stressed when I work. Therefore, I have a mental game coach.
Yeah, I mean, I think people should view it more as just like any form of coaching in poker. It's like having a technical coach doesn't mean that you're necessarily terrible technically. It's just you're trying to improve, you're trying to sharpen that edge. And it's exactly the same with a mental game coach. I've got a lot of guys who I work with who haven't got serious mental game issues, even when they come to me. It's just they want to fine tune. And I think that's really where, a lot of people miss out, is that they say, well, I'm not smashing things, so therefore it doesn't make sense to me. But any edge you can get in the games right now, and especially after January, if you're on stars, is going to be incredibly significant.
Yeah, you need every dollar. It's getting tougher every minute.
Yeah, I come out of a sports psychology background, and all athletes, work with sports psychologists. It's just a given if you're an athlete of any sort of stature. And nowadays, we even see parents of children, like little leaguers, they want their kids to have a sports psychologist on the roster. So I wonder if that sort of thing is going to, evolve.
I almost think
poker.
That's sad. Jimmy, you missed the ball.
Get your sports psychology. I do think that is a little bit excessive myself, and I don't work with any kids, in those lower groups. But I just find it interesting that sports psychology, maybe 30 years ago, it was kind of the way mental game coaching is with poker now, but it's evolved to now where everybody who's anybody in sports has a sports psychologist. Period.
It's just standard. It's because there's an edge there to be gained. And do you still see it, Paul, when you're on the tables and you're playing the spins? Do you see people tilting their money off? Is it quite clear from the outside when you're playing against people if they're just losing control?
Oh yeah, I mean, spins are a really tilting format because because there's so much variance in them for a start. And like you can be sitting there getting your 14th 2x in a row. That itself can be a form of sort of tilt, or it can be tilt inducing anyway, because like you only make real money when you spin a higher multiplier. If you don't spin any higher multipliers, it can be pretty frustrating. And you see this come out in the games, like guys they'll play fine for like 7 or 8 minutes, take a bad beat, and then they're in the next game just like open shoving every hand. I mean, it's like there are some tilting formats. I think Omaha can be really tilting because of the variance. Heads up can be really tilting, like heads up hypers, because of the variance. And then spins, which has not only variance within the game, but then variance for how much you're playing for, can be incredibly tilting. I have a friend who's Ukrainian and had a strong dislike for a fellow professional. He was so upset when that guy binked the 180K, he couldn't play for 2 weeks.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite incredible.
Yeah, he was like literally depressed, or seemed to be depressed, because someone else had been successful while he had been grinding away and never hitting any multipliers. It was pretty funny.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that gives a really good idea of just the stress levels that can be reached with these different formats.
I think the more variance, the more stress, but the more potential to make money.
Yeah.
What do you think about, with the people that I tend to work with? I really like some sort of pre-competition routine, like a pre-competition warm up. Have you any experience with doing certain things, like maybe a short meditation or something like that before you start playing? And what are your thoughts on that? Right.
Well, absolutely agree. I mean, I think I mentioned earlier, like a sports team running onto the field with no preparation, It's just madness. At the risk of sounding like a complete Elliot shill, I have used these warm-up MP3s for years, like every day before I play, and I just wouldn't think about going to the tables without them. I just feel that that's like pre-game, do the warm-up, all right, now I'm ready to play. I just wouldn't feel like my thoughts were organized and I was ready to play if I didn't do something like that.
Yeah, I think for most people, they do need to develop a routine. And I feel like it includes also, making sure that you're not hungry, making sure that you're hydrated, all those sorts of things too, in addition to maybe like a warm-up MP3 or meditation.
Meditation as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it helps if you live where I live, like in Indonesia, like you can have all of that taken care. Like someone else can take care of that for you. Like call the maid, and like every morning she knows the routine. Like I have friends who grind here, so like a little Bali story, and they grind all night. They have like a pretty big staff at their house. So this will give you like a Bali story and sort of some sort of insight into the border lifestyle that they have. They have like a pile of $5 bills like sitting there. So their deal is, if they're grinding and they need coffee or they need a snack or they need a juice or something at 3:00 in the morning, they want the staff like just desperate to like come bring that to them. So there's a $5 tip for like whoever does it first, basically. So the pile of $5 notes are sitting there. they call the staff, and then like, boom, everything rocks up within minutes, and then everyone gets tipped. Like that's their lifestyle. That's their level of sort of preparedness, that they're going to be at the top of their game throughout sort of their session, and like everything they need will be brought to them instantly. Like that's how they play poker.
And I mean, that gives you an idea of just how competitive it is out there now.
Yep.
Yeah, as compared to the other extreme, which is like 2006, the games are good, and some guy is sitting there literally with a piss bottle because he doesn't want to take a break and go to the toilet.
But, times they haven't changed because, if you think back to the early 2000s, you barely needed to know how to play. You could eat a terrible diet. You could just not pay attention to anything if you just knew, a little bit of strategy. And now look at how completely different that is.
Yeah, you just got to be so focused. You've got to be prepared with every aspect, or else you're giving away edge, and the edges are so small you can't give away edge anymore.
And I think there's actually a significant edge in living in a country where the costs are lower. I talk to people in different time zones all day long, and there is definitely a different pressure for people who've chosen to live somewhere where the living costs are lower. Because as you say, you can get all of those things done. The food's cheaper, your rent's cheaper. And then, if I'm talking to somebody who's in London or Toronto, the money you have to be making at poker to live in one of those metropolitan cities is incredible. So the pressure on those players is completely different to the pressure on perhaps someone who's living in Thailand or in Mexico or Indonesia. Do you see what I mean in terms of the choice from that side?
Oh, absolutely. And like, imagine also people that have a family. It's different if you're a single guy and like your main expenses is like going out and having fun and like a little bit of rent, or if you've got like 2 kids and a family to run and like you've got like a $3,000 or $4,000 night every month, like it's a completely different situation. Like I often tell people so that they can sort of understand where I've come from. Like imagine every month of your poker career, you always had to sort of shell out $3,000 or $4,000 from your role, no matter what. And like, how would you build up your role? How would you move up? There's a lot of pressure. I mean, I'm not sort of unhappy about the situation. I mean, I chose to do poker, so that's what I'm faced with. But like, it's very different for people in different situations. There's also the idea of like, how long is poker going to be around for and how profitable is it going to be, which is something which I constantly think about. Obviously, the games get tougher every minute. Stars is making the environment tougher. If I was a young person, I would be I'd be doing a few things. First of all, I'd be thinking about having an exit plan, like, where is my money going to go to? Poker might not be here forever. And then second of all, I would be trying to make as much money as I could while the games are good. Like, just like right now is the time to make every dollar that you can. And like, third of all, I wouldn't be thinking to myself, like, poker will last forever, because it may not.
And what you just said is super important to people. You need to make a plan. You need to have long-term goals and maybe be looking at, some investments or your education or business or something like that. And I just love that you brought up that point so that people can really, put some thought into that.
Yeah, I think, sorry, that a lot of the people that play are young and they just don't think about the future, and like they don't have that idea that sort of things aren't always going to be like they are right now. Whereas if you've been around for a long time, you've had those ideas of things will be the same, and then you realize, oh, hang on, they're wrong. Like things haven't stayed the same. They haven't been consistent. So if you're young and you're making money out of poker, just be thinking about how you can invest it. Think about the future. It won't always be this good. You might not always be on top of the games. The games might die. Your format might die. Like, make every dollar you can and don't waste it, would be my advice. Think about how you're going to invest it. Think about your long-term plan. Have a short-term plan, which should be make as much money as you can. Have a medium-term plan, which would be like medium-term investments. Then a long-term plan where, all right, I've exited out of poker because I have enough money.
And I mean, just thinking about that, I mean, the reality is it's unlikely the game's going to get any easier.
Like, today is the softest the games are going to be for the rest of history. Like, unless some miracle happens, like America comes back into the poker ecosystem, but we can't rely on that. Like, they get tougher every day. You have to work on your games every minute. And the level of study and effort that has gone into heads up sit and goes in the last few years. And now the games are just practically dead. If you look at the lobby at any time, it's regs playing each other and a very few fish games. And I'm pretty sure that Stars gave up on heads up sit and goes. They basically said, all right, there are cartels in place. There are regs established. Bugger it, we'll go to a different format and we'll control that instead of trying to fight these guys. And they've introduced spins, and they're not putting any promotional effort into heads up sit and goes. they don't care about them anymore. They're like, well, let those guys have their playground. They're dead, and we'll put all of our effort into spins.
You know, we see this all the time in the sports world where what it takes to achieve any given, achievement just gets shorter and shorter. It's just like for, 100 years, we thought, it was impossible to run a 4-minute mile. Somebody runs a 4-minute mile, and then pretty soon, high schoolers are doing it, and it's not even like a major achievement. So I think we're seeing the same thing in poker, where that time to achieve is just getting shorter and shorter and shorter. What are your thoughts on that?
The tools that are out there now, which I'm not going to mention by name because I don't want to help everybody, but like the tools that are out there, like I know, I can give you an example. There was a guy that was a losing player at low stakes and simply started using the tools in his off time almost as his hobby. And just like, that was what he would do. He would grind these poker tools, even though he was a losing player and was barely playing. And then all of a sudden he pops back like a couple of years later and just starts crushing at the higher levels because he's been studying all this time. He went from a guy that couldn't even beat the games to a guy that was like crushing some of the better players out there because the tools are there. Like there's no excuse not to be working hard on your game at this stage. The tools are there. They're easy to use and everybody else is doing it.
Yeah. Make sure you do your homework, kids.
Yep.
And then our most important question, Paul, the worst tilt you've ever witnessed or personally done yourself in poker, or even if you've heard of in terms of your history in the game, sort of the most extreme example?
Well, my friend who was living in Thailand would tell me about a bunch of famous grinders there living in a beautiful location. And this is hilarious. I won't mention these guys by name, but they were fantastic players, but they had some serious mental game issues. They would be deep in a tournament and so sure that they would win the tournament. Like, they're sitting 14th or something. And like up top, there's like, $16,000. They would start shopping on eBay. And
wow.
then, like, there's $16,000 up top. I'm bound to win this. Like, what can I buy? And then if things didn't work out, which invariably they don't, they would be like, oh my God, I've just spent $8,000. Oh my God, I didn't win. I can't believe I didn't win. Oh my God, like I'm locked in to buy this now. I mean, they would be hilarious. And like one time the guy went out of a tournament after his eBay shopping sort of binge and started slowly unplugging his monitor. And like everybody's watching him silently and he doesn't say a word, slowly sort of plugs the monitor, picks up his mouse, smashes it against the wall, walks to the balcony and just calmly heaves the monitor into the pool like 2 stories below. And then goes searching for another monitor he can now play on.
On eBay, no doubt.
Yeah.
So like, but those guys are legends for their tilt behavior and for earning millions in MTTs and then blowing it. So like,
wow.
Hey, the story's good. That's what we're after. So, man, thank you so much for coming on the show. And where can people find out about your coaching for spins?
I've got a thread on 2+2, or people can add me on Skype. My screen name there is CogDissonance1, 1 as in the numeral. Look, thanks for having me. And I know that Elliot's sort of releasing a new spin MP3, so I shall shamelessly plug it. I've listened to it.
You're gonna get some monies from this interview, Paul. Thank you very much.
I've listened to the MP3 and like. My only frustration is that I want to be sending it to people that I know, and I'm like, oh no, I promised Elliot I wouldn't send it. It hasn't been released yet. I don't even know how much he's selling it for, but you've got to get your hands on this thing. It's awesome.
Build the hype.
Yeah, it really is a fantastic MP3. So get your hands on it, listen to it.
Well, thank you very much. And,
awesome.
As I say, once again, thanks for coming on the show, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, Paul.
Bye.
So that was great to talk to Paul today, just covering all of those things, and also nice of him to put in those shill adverts for me, wasn't it?
And you didn't even pay him to do that.
Allegedly, I didn't. But yeah, some big changes happening for a lot of the pros out there. It's one of the reasons I wanted to have him on this week, because there's a lot of guys who, not everyone is making millions and millions of dollars in poker. There are a lot of guys out there just supporting their families. And these changes by Stars are actually pretty significant, aren't they?
Yeah, it's almost like a doomsday scenario in some ways. And I think his point about making sure you have an exit strategy and making sure, you're saving and investing your money was very well taken and timely given all the changes that Stars is throwing at the players right now.
Yeah, I think that's something people should really, really be taking very seriously right now. Make sure you have the exit plan. And more than that, make sure you're in a position to absolutely make the most money you possibly can right now in the games. Do your study, put in the volume, don't take months and months off. I speak to a lot of players who were playing in perhaps what you'd call the golden age now, looking back, and they'll be saying that they can't believe they didn't put in more effort when they could have been printing money. Now, there's a chance in 5 years' time, people might look back at today as a golden age, and you need to be putting that effort in now. If you're profitable at the moment, put in that volume, put in that time, make as much as you possibly can in the current games.
And, he even said something to the effect of, if you lose one chip, that's like one chip too many, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the reality of online poker now.
It really is. And I even feel like there's still plenty of money to be made in the live arena, but even in the live arena, people have gotten better over time. And it's just the sort of thing where as time goes on, more people get the books, they get the videos, they get the MP3s, and the games just get tougher and tougher. So if you're not keeping up, it just really shows itself,
So as we say, do your homework out there and put in the volume.
And hire a coach.
All of
that was one of the most important things he brought up, right?
Yeah, all of the above. Definitely. I mean, it's a huge shortcut. If you are a professional, you should have a coach, because it will almost always pay you back multiples. So long as you have a good enough coach, you'll make substantially more money than they cost. There are people out there spending a fortune on coaches. I've heard of coaches charging up to $1,500 an hour, and their students saying it's worth the money. So, be aware it is an investment in your game if you're a professional. So just, keep that in mind. So, Trisha, where can people find out about you?
You can check out my website, drtrishacardner.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Dr. Trisha Cardner, or you can find Positive Poker on Amazon.com.
And my website is pokermindcoach.com. So if you want to find out about me, just, check it out. Okay, so thanks, guys, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye, guys.
You've been listening to the Mindset Advantage podcast with Elliot Rowe and Dr. Trisha Cardner. To get any resources mentioned in the episode or to listen to past shows, visit pokermindcoach.com/TMA podcast. Thanks for listening.